So as you know, I'm Gemma. I'm here today with Natasha, who is a journalist, a chronic illness podcaster, and blogger. That's the word I was looking for. I'm so tired. Welcome, and thank you very much for taking part in this today, Natasha. Obviously, what we're going to talk about will be all around self-care. Can we just chat a little bit about what's your background for anyone that doesn't know you? How did you come to this as this sort of area, and what sort of things it is that you talk about on your different streams, different areas?
Yeah, so I started on social media. Well, I used to run a youth international journalism platform, and then my health got really, really bad in my mid-20s, and I got sucked in by the "you can cure yourself" thing that was kind of happening 6, 7, 8 years ago. So I started Instagram purely as a food diary for myself, and then I discovered hashtags, and then I kind of was talking about all of that. Then I realized that I'd been kind of duped, and then I started talking about that. And then I didn't really know what I was doing for a while. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a bit of a platform. And kind of over the last year or so, I've been working with experts in the chronic illness and long-term pain space to help provide resources for people who don't get access to the care and the support that they need. And a lot of the basic things that I think most people should be taught when they get diagnosed with a chronic illness. So I often think, what did I need a decade ago? What did I need when I was a child? What did I need all of this time? And I try and make that. And then my other side is I'm a journalist for the BBC, and I focus on long reads. So yeah, I try and balance everything. Oh, and I have started a podcast about some of the issues, because I like writing very long things, and I know that's not accessible to a lot of people, so they can listen to me ramble about them too.
Let's talk a bit about reframing what self-care is, because one of the things that I think that comes up quite a lot, especially in the world of MS, with MSers, is this idea that, especially when you're newly diagnosed and you get a new diagnosis, that you should immediately start doing self-care. And self-care for the masses, when you go and start looking at, say, Instagram and self-care hashtags, isn't what it needs to be for you, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit around that. It's just what is actually self-care, and what it's not, basically. So one of the things we were talking about the other day was, what is self-care really? What is it fundamentally? What is it, the thing that you're supposed to be doing really? And why does it make any difference?
Yeah, first of all, I'll just say I don't have MS, so there'll be elements of the MS experience that I can't speak about. For me, self-care is anything that I can do that makes sure that I'm able to look after myself in the best way possible. So on some days, self-care might be having a bath, and actually having a bath is really, really good for me because the heat helps my joint pain and it gives me a chance to relax. But self-care can also be making sure that I'm hydrated. It can be making sure that I don't lie in bed all day without moving, because that kind of makes me get all tense. And so I think the idea of self-care is often very kind of commercial. It's like, what can you buy? Can you light the candles? Can you do these things? Can you have these expensive items that can make you feel like you're having a luxurious experience? But for me, it's actually often those really small fundamental building blocks that are very easy to neglect when you're like really busy and trying to live your life. And it's the things about how can I look after myself in the best way possible. And I'm not very good at it. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. Like, I have to work really hard at it. So yeah.
And that's a thing I think that people seem to not really realize sometimes, is that self-care is really hard work. It is not something that's it doesn't come naturally to anybody. Don't let what do they call them, an influencer somewhere, sit around with their bowl of, what's the latest thing? Is it like nature's cereal is the latest thing that everyone keeps eating, which is basically just some fruit and some water in ice chips. And then, seriously. And they just, it's this whole like big, massive industry of wellness that will tell you that self-care is buying something and it's really easily entertained. It's really, it's something that you can just do. And it really isn't. It's nonsense. It's hard work.
It is. And I think you kind of mentioned wellness, and as that was kind of like my introduction to like this world, I'll say that it's also very much seen as like, you are responsible for making sure that you can make yourself better. And I think that damaging message, especially in the long-term illness space. So for me, I went from like fighting to try and fix myself to realizing there are things that I can do to help myself. It doesn't mean I'm gonna like be fixed, but I can kind of learn to adapt and live with things in a way that means I'm not fighting it, and then I have the best chance of feeling as well as I can. And it doesn't sound like there's a difference between those things, but actually it's quite a substantial, it's a really substantial mental shift that was probably one of the most important things for me.
Yeah, and I completely get that as well. Like it is, I think it is a big mental shift away from this thing of, you know, something that you can do that it's going to cure you, and something that you can do that's just going to help you, and now how much that help is going to mean to you as well, because you kind of don't know, especially like when you're newly diagnosed, you won't know how much the help means to you. But as I think anyone else like myself who's been diagnosed now for, you know, I've been 10 years diagnosed with MS, it is unreal how much it was needed, and it's kind of fashioned and shaped a lot of things, just self-care in itself. Cool. Okay, then next up, let's have a quick talk about, I guess, self-care and what it means to different people as well. I think one of the things I want to just put out there as well, and explain into this, is that we're not talking about self-care as in a catch-all for all people with MS. We're not trying to talk about it for all people with just long-term conditions under that umbrella. It's nothing like that. It's very much going to be very much down to you, what works for you. But first, I think there's a bit of work to be done that's around what it is that you can do to be able to, you know, what it is that you can have some control over, or you can actually improve, to sort of just focus what your self-care is going to be on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a few years ago, when I was having a really, really hard time, I went to see my GP and I said to him, just once, I wish I could go somewhere and be looked after and not have to feel responsible for every single thing that I do. And he said to me, you know that the nature of your conditions is that most of the things are things that you can do. And I'm going to say I'm extremely fortunate. I have people that can help me with some of those things. But at the same time, I have to make small choices every day that take me towards things that I know help me. I get really simple things. I get dehydrated so easily. I turn into like a child. It's hilarious. Like people can look at me and know that I'm dehydrated. They just point at my water bottle. I don't know what comes out of my mouth when I'm dehydrated, but it's ridiculous. But also, you know, I know when I'm having a really hard time, I just want to stay in bed, but actually it makes my pain a lot worse. I set, for me, a really big act of self-care is setting timers so that I can move. It's setting, and even if that movement is going and standing by the window and breathing fresh air for a minute, that is an act of self-care that makes me feel better. And so I think it's not necessarily about these huge things and saying you have to make these huge changes to your life. Often for a lot of people, it's 30 seconds at a time. And those things really do build up over time. And I think that is, it's an expectation shift, and it is so unique to everybody. And it is hard to figure out what works for you and your body. Like what is really good for me might not work for you, although I think not being dehydrated is good for everyone.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to turn around and be like, I can deal with that. No, everyone needs to drink water.
Yeah, but it takes time, and it takes experimentation to kind of figure out what self-care looks like for you. And you know, I've seen some people in the chat talking about like being selfish isn't always being selfish. For me, I find it really hard to say no. So self-care for me is often like telling people to go away. Like I've set up on Fridays, I'm Jewish and I used to do Shabbat growing up, but now we do like a tech Shabbat where like 7 o'clock on a Friday, my phone and my laptop go away. Everyone knows I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to respond to them. And that has been like the biggest act of self-care for me, knowing that I've got a time where like
just on your own,
on my own with my fiance. That's it. Don't care about anything or anyone else, just having, and that has been like, I love it. I look forward to it every week.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a big one. I think that's a big one for everybody, is that like, and there's quite a few people that are commenting that's saying no, and not punishing yourself for saying no are the two things that, you know, that are probably, I think as well, especially just from the MS sort of center of it, that is for me the major thing that I've had to change, is I have to say no to people, especially to things that I don't even want to do. Like, that's the ridiculous thing, is that after a while, once you get into the thing of practicing self-care and you actually start to really look after yourself, you realize there's quite a few things that you don't want to do. You don't want to. So saying no then becomes a little bit easier.
How have you found it with the pandemic? Because for me, okay, like obviously pandemic very bad, but actually the not being able to go out, especially at the beginning, I felt more connected to work because everyone was on Zoom. I didn't go out because I thought I wanted to go out. I didn't go out because I thought I needed to go out. I realized I don't like being around people, and that sounds awful, but I find it so exhausting. That it's one of those things where it gave me the opportunity to reevaluate, especially because I had years where I couldn't go out, that all I wanted was to go out and be normal. And this almost gave me an opportunity to be like, oh, my health has been more stable in the last year than it has been in the last 5 or 6 years, because of those external pressures and pressures that I put on myself to try and keep doing those normal things are gone.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's been a really
hugely
interesting. Yeah.
I think I keep seeing things like that. A lot of people are saying that being in lockdown has been massively advantageous to their health. Whether you have a long-term condition or not, it's been massively advantageous. The global burnout is a thing that everybody is working towards and everyone's doing. And it was, you know, actually having full-on permission from everybody to say, you know what, you're going to work from home, you're going to stay at home, you're only going to leave when you need to, you're not going to go out anywhere else, made everybody sort of just go, oh, okay, let me reevaluate things. Is that really that important? And if it is that important, then fair enough. But if it's not, then let it go. And it's a weird phenomenon, but it definitely as well, I think, brings about that thing of like, of how it brings about for me a knowledge of how uncomfortable those situations were for me. Like, I didn't realize. I thought it was a normal thing to do, so I was doing them, but I did not realize how uncomfortable it was. So things like just going to the supermarket and having people be really close and lots of noise. Like, one of the things I have got, actually, I've started doing again. I never realized I did it when I was younger, but wearing like noise cancelling headphones, or using those ones that you put in your ear, just so you don't get that sort of noise. I can't take noise. I can take busyness, but as soon as there's a cacophony of noise, I get really sensitive. And I didn't realize until lockdown, really, that I can't stand that. So I put headphones on. Absolutely.
And I think that all of those things are acts of self-care. I think at the heart of self-care is recognizing what you need to function as well as you need to do. My best friend says that we kind of talk about living life on hard mode. It's you know, these are things that generally affect most people, but we just have to do it on hard mode. There was just a thing about Natasha speaking from a personal long-term condition perspective and not MS. I don't have MS. I have EDS and ME and some comorbidities with that, but Gemma can speak about MS specifically.
So just to be very clear, Natasha doesn't have MS, but she does have other long-term conditions that obviously affect her greatly, massively during the days, and that's why you've got into this thing of talking about it. And one of the reasons why I asked Natasha to come here is because she recently was on Instagram, and you were talking about self-care and how to look after yourself, and just calling some of the nonsense on what self-care actually is. And I thought, you know what, that'd be really brilliant to ask you to come on to here. And then the last bit of this section that we're going to talk about is like, how does self-care impact long-term conditions? And I think that's something that we just need to, I think, understand. It's something that I didn't get for the first 5 years at least of, for instance, diagnosis, was the impact of self-care on your long-term condition. And I think with all long-term conditions, self-care will always help. Speaking just to MS specifically, I've got relapsing remitting MS, and I'm not going to talk to anyone else that has a different type of MS because I don't think it's my place to do so. But I will say that it does definitely have a long-term impact. Being able to pace yourself, being able to, and pacing, they'll always tell you about pacing, looking after your body, taking your vitamin D, not getting, you know, overwhelmed in big places, not constantly trying to, you know, push through and burn out, that will have a long-term effect on your health. I have a lot less relapses once I managed to learn to pace myself. Basically, I kept pushing myself into relapses by making myself more ill. And even things like not being in offices if someone else is ill, walking into the office, seeing someone looking terrible and going, nope, and walking back out again, just means that I get less infections. And less infections means I get less relapses. And less relapses mean less long-term, you know, illness. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
things like that, it can slow it down.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned pacing, and I'm kind of obsessed with talking about pacing at the moment, because I have been told my entire life to pace, and no one explained what pacing was until I started working with Jo Southall, who is an occupational therapist who has similar conditions to me. So it's one of those things where I know that my health got as bad as it did because I did not know, and I wasn't taught how to manage it properly. And I think it's one of those things where it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, I had a call yesterday, and like, luckily through the work that I do, I work with experts, which means I can call an expert if I'm having a hard time. So I spoke to a physio that I work with regularly, because I've been having a lot of issues with my face and all of this stuff, and it's very, very painful. And she was like, Natasha, I know like everything that's going on in your life. Like, this isn't a surprise. And I think it's one of those things where when we are really busy, when we do have all these external stresses, when we do have all of these other things going on, one, it's harder to take the time to look after yourself, but two, you're almost having to undo like all the additional stuff that is being piled on you. So like, it's harder to kind of keep things at like a base level to look after yourself. So like, I have to be so strict about it that like, I'm like, how can I triple take advantage of this self-care? I'm going to have a bath where I meditate and put a face mask on. So that's 3 things in one. Or, you know, like, and I schedule stuff in to make sure that I do it, because I won't do it. I'm like a massive workaholic. I won't do it. And it's really challenging when you have a lot of external stresses that you can't do anything about. You know, and we often don't think about, you know, family or friends are having a hard time and you've got to support them. That can be really exhausting. The pandemic, everyone's talking about that. That's an additional external stress on top of everything. And so I think a lot of times people, like, something my OT says is literally take some time, to make a note of every single kind of external stressor that you have in your life, because, and we often forget, like, pain is a huge external stressor. So, you know, that, but also she said, write down everything that you do to try and manage your condition, and you realize how much time, energy, and stress that is in and of itself, while trying to live your life as well. So it like, I know how much of an impact that it has, and for me, self-care is trying to mitigate those things in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would be, I might do that one day. I may write it all down, and I think that would be quite a scary prospect to do, of writing down all the things that are stresses in one sort of column, and in the next column all the things that I do to mitigate those stresses, and just seeing the sheer, just huge thing that it is, that's just basically just trying to be well as I can do. Just one thing I want to go back to, and I want to ask other people about this, is that, so we have a comment, hang on, I can't find my cursor, from Peter Walker has come on and said he has PPMS, which is quite depressing. It gets worse and doesn't improve. As it gets worse and doesn't improve, it's hard to know how to deal with this. What sort of self-care can help? Again, this is the sort of thing that we're going to give you some examples of self-care. They may not apply to you. They may not be specific to you, because they're going to give, if we give you too many specifics, we can spend the next hour talking about specifics of how we manage our illnesses, but they may not apply to you. So two people then I was going to say, two things I was going to say is that we're going to give you lots of examples, and we're going to tell you how to, you know, adapt them to yourself, and things, places where you can find things you can do in your life. But secondly, also, can anyone out there who thinks that they have something that they can say, that someone with primary progressive MS, put it into the chat. If you've got something that you do that you find helps and works for you, put your examples into the chat and we'll read them out, just to try and help out a bigger a number of people, just as much as we possibly can do. So just to read out a couple more of the comments that we've got. So like Catherine was saying, it's hard to pace when family doesn't get it, though diagnosed in 2006 and now in a wheelchair, I get stressed really easily. That is absolutely true. You know, I'm talking to someone who doesn't have those sort of stress. That's not one of my stresses, of having other people immediately to me that with needs, but I completely can get how that can add on to it, sort of thing. And then, oh, I don't know who said that one because I can't really see. It's also someone else's main issue, currently off work after ignoring all the signs that they were massively overdoing it, things. Yeah, we've all been there. Unfortunately, more than once as well. Learn nothing. MSers, the MSers who seem to be bossing it all come across as really zen. It would be good to know how to disregard those external stresses. I can tell you right now, I'm the least zen person you will ever meet. And I think Natasha is quite similar. I think we're quite similar in the fact that we're both very high functioning people who function in a way that's not meant for how people should function. So
no, but I think just on that, like, I think that, like, I went through a phase where I was like, I need to learn to be a Zen person. And people say to me, you're not naturally a Zen person, but it doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can do that work for you and your body. So I think a lot of it is about finding whatever those things are for you, because I know that if I kind of took on a Zen persona, I wouldn't feel like I was myself. I'd feel like I'd feel like I would be holding myself back. I'd be feeling those things. And I think just something on like the kind of personality that Gemma and I have, if this is something that helped me, I think one of the big elements of pacing is that you generally pace as well as you can, so that you can make decisions about when you are going to push yourself. So it's not that you're constantly like flailing around and living in this place where you have zero control over anything that's going on, but you can say like, oh, I know that I need to push myself at this time, but you've made a conscious choice to do it and you can plan for the repercussions of it. Those are two very different experiences, which I find quite helpful personally.
Yeah, it's a helpful distinction, isn't it, to say I can do this right now and it's going to take a lot out of me, to I can do everything and I will always do everything and until I keep burning out. Like, there's a very different thing. I may plan a burnout, but it'll be for a really good cause. It's usually something huge, like, I don't know, a family reunion or something like that, something where everyone's getting together and it's really important that everyone has a really good time. So yeah, totally. Which brings us on to our next bit. So the next part I've just sort of named, and it's called self-care in the strangest of places. And I've called it that because I think self-care can be found in away from the cookie cutter things of, you know, like take a bath without extremely expensive bath oils, or light a candle that costs you 35 quid when you're in your house and things like that. I think self-care can be found in the weirdest of things that we do, and it's all very much individual. So we're going to just give you a couple of examples of things that, you know, are really good, are things that work really well for us, and things that really, really wouldn't, that we're being told to do, that are actually stressors. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, with just to drive home the fact that it's not cookie cutter. We can't kind of give you all the answers, but we can point you at least in the right direction, hopefully, and give you a bit of hope that there is something out there that you can do that will look after yourself. So one of the things we were talking about was one of the things I saw recently was about COVID and that COVID lockdown, and how there was a lot of pressure on to achieve during the lockdown. You're supposed to have got all this extra time, and people were asking kind of like, what have you done with your time? What have you achieved? What have you done to further your life, better yourself, and do all these different things? And I was like, nothing. But, and it's the same sort of thing with self-care. You don't have to perform it for people to see. It's not something that you can tell people what it is that you can do. It's something that you can just be doing quietly behind the scenes. There's a lot of performative stuff at the moment, I think, that's out there, and I don't think it's helpful. It's actually probably a self-care thing for me personally, to have done nothing through lockdown. I've actually, you know, I got a bike, I got an exercise bike,
But,
Go on it.
but you said that like something that we had a similar experience of through this lockdown is it made you reflect on the way you were living before lockdown and what you wanted to do. That in and of itself is a huge piece of self-care work, right? Because you kind of you've it's not something flashy that you actively did, but it was percolating, it was happening during all this time. And I think that in and of itself is a really important part of self-care. I think a lot of times we don't take the time to sit back and reflect on how we're feeling, what we're doing, if it is working for us. That in and of itself is self-care. And kind of just thinking about what we want and how we can go about doing it.
That would be probably the biggest one, wouldn't it? Like, for those people that are out there saying, okay, where do I start with self-care? Start just by writing, journaling, thinking, recording on your voice on your phone, but just things that you think to yourself, I would quite like to achieve this. I want to have less of this. I'm not enjoying this, or I am really enjoying this. Just literally putting those things down and noticing them is massive, because then you can start to build on them. And yeah, especially now that you've been in lockdown, have a little think back to how life was before lockdown and how life is here. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like Jennifer's just said as well in the comments again, COVID is definitely lessened the guilt I felt for not doing so much. Maybe that was one of the things that you write down. I feel really guilty because I'm not going out and doing lots of things. Then what you need to do is not necessarily do more things. Maybe you need to feel less guilty. And that's an act of self-care in itself. So that could be number one for everybody, is to go and have a think about that. Have a think about what it is that you're uncomfortable with at the moment.
Something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the concept of no 0 days. So I tend to, like, I'm a natural boom buster, which is partly why I talk about pacing so much. Like, I'm very prone to boom or bust. And when I was younger, especially before I had a diagnosis, I would only stop when my body had crashed so much that I had to stop. You know, I've had issues since I was like 6 or 7, right? So I kind of grew up in an environment where everyone, as far as I knew, was healthy, and I just wanted to keep up with that. So it's something that's been ingrained in me since childhood. So it's going to take a long time to kind of learn how to deal with. But for me, what I would still do is, I would crash and then I just lie in bed feeling sorry. And I think lying in bed feeling sorry for yourself is very, very important. But in my house, we always had a 24-hour rule where, and it works for me. I know it does not work for a lot of people, but then like my mum or my fiance has to like lovingly bully me to make me do something like tiny, but it's tiny. And so something that I've been thinking about a lot is, what is the 1% of something that I can do on my really good days that I can do on my worst days? There's always like a 1% something that is, even sitting up in bed, breathing for 30 seconds. I can do that, and that helps with the thing I've got in my neck. And for me, that is one of the parts of self-care that I've been working on the most, is how can I not go from like 0 to 100 and then back down to 0? Is trying to kind of keep things as stable as possible. So I'm not going like, oh, okay, I feel better today, let's go straight back to doing everything. It's more, can I keep the pendulum, I'm mixing metaphors, but kind of keep things as more stable as possible.
No, I like that visualization as well, of not having to constantly go up to 100 and back down to 0 and 100 back down to 0, but actually try and stick to things around the 50% mark and just keep it all steady. That is absolutely genius.
A lot of people also find it really helpful to write down. Like my OT said, she has like a flare-up meal of like a tomato soup, but when she's having a really bad flare-up, she can pour it out of the tin in the microwave. When she feels a bit better, she could do it on the stove. When she's a little bit better, she can maybe pick some basil and put it in there. And so she has like all of these different grades of what she can do. And for a lot of people, especially if it's new, kind of writing those things down can be really helpful. And it's best to do it when you're having a really good day. So you can think about what elements of things can be hard on your bad days. And then you've got it literally written down that you can give to someone if you've got someone that can support you, or that you've got there. So you can be like, this is something I know that I can hopefully do today. And you don't have to think about it when you're fatigued and you've got brain fog. I think it's like, I have a lot of problems with online productivity stuff. However, I will say that a lot of the elements of what they do is how can you hack things to make it make the jump between you wanting to do something and it actually happening shorter. And I find that can be really useful for kind of dealing with harder times.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got to admit as well, I've got the exact same thing. I have a list on my kitchen, my kitchen wall of foods to eat when I'm tired. So when I come in and I'm fatigued out my brain, rather than ordering a takeaway or eating something that's going to be rubbish for me, which I'm then going to feel rubbish about afterwards, I have a list. And my top go-to is always scrambled eggs on toast, because scrambling an egg takes 2 minutes to do, and I can do it really quickly, and it always kind of tastes good. And then on toast, and there's something as well about it being a comfort food. It's quite soft, it's quite warm, it's quite just comforting. That it also helps with things like depression and anxiety and things like that, not just with fatigue and overstimulation. It's just genius. And I definitely think that everybody should definitely try that. And yeah, that's definitely one thing that I would say. I love the idea as well of having like the base thing and then just adding bits to it after you're feeling better. It's just genius.
And one thing that this just reminded me of is a tool that I used a few years ago. So when I would have a really bad flare up, I'd be in bed and I'm like, I've done literally nothing. I feel awful about myself. I hate everything. And I started writing have done lists. So every time I did an activity, I wrote it down and then ticked it off. And then I realized at the end of the day, oh, okay, I might not have been able to work. I might not have been able to go out. I had a chat with my mum. I brushed my teeth. I got myself food because I was living alone at that time. Like, those things are still things. And I think, tell this to 21-year-old me, and I would have got very annoyed about this, because I did get very annoyed about it. Don't tell me to appreciate the things that I should be doing anyway. But actually, no, I've grown up a little bit. Actually, those are the things that help you help me anyway, cope a bit better, because you're like, I feel awful and I still manage to do these things. And I think most of the time, even if you got out of bed to go to the loo and you didn't hold it for like 5 hours, that's still, if you hold it for 3 hours instead of 5 hours and you manage to go to the loo, that's great, and I think I think a lot of the stuff that we talk about is like acceptance and expectation management, which is really, really hard. But I think part of the reason it is hard for a lot of people is because the vast majority of people are not given the tools they need to learn how to manage this stuff in the first place. And yeah, we have all been there with the loo all day.
Especially, and it's a ridiculous thing as well, especially when you've got, just talking to the loo thing about, like, if you've got problems with your bladder and bladder issues, the one thing you cannot do is hold the toilet for that long. And yet, every time I will be like, just 5 more minutes in bed, just 5 more minutes in bed, just 5 more minutes in bed, just 5 more minutes in bed. Oh no. You just like, that's ridiculous. Just get up and go. I think we're definitely all capable of doing that one. The other thing that I would suggest as well is finding stuff. So there's a lot of stuff at the moment around mindfulness, and I think Joe talks about it quite well in the original podcast, that it's kind of been hijacked. Mindfulness has been hijacked, and it's been made in something that's very, very difficult to attend to. It's really, really hard to do. If you are depressed, upset, angry, full of anxiety, trying to just stop and think and let your feelings move over you is nigh on impossible. And I'm, like I said as well, I'm quite type A personality wise. I can't do that. I can't just tell myself to stop doing stuff. So things like doing stuff like sewing, like I'm in my studio right now, sewing something, or putting on my makeup. I can sit and put on a full beat face, like all the makeup this thick, full with eyelashes, and spend 2 hours doing it, feels really good about it, and then be like, oh, that was brilliant. And I feel, and that isn't itself mindfulness. It's just diverting my mind to something, concentrating on it for a while, letting everything else just wash over me, a little bit of time for my brain to stop working again, and at the end of it, my face looks amazing. I will literally just take it off and then go to bed. It's not the point. I'm not going out anywhere. But it makes me feel better. And that's why I was trying to say about self-care in the weirdest of places. Everyone will have a weird thing that they do that, like, I never have nails. I never have nice nails. I'm a gardener. I will put false nails on, big, massive false nails on, and intricately do them because of the mindfulness effort of it. And then I will take them off because I can't cope. Things like that.
I really struggle with mindfulness. Like a decade ago, I was in like an EDS support group thing where they brought someone in to talk about mindfulness, and they didn't explain mindfulness properly. And they basically then had a bunch of people who were in a lot of pain and asking them to focus on their body and just notice. And that was a really weird thing, and I hated it. And I think I was very against it. Now I can do it in the sense that, like, I know I need to breathe to like release stuff. So I use it for that. I use it as a time to like have my neck and my back go all crunchy because I love that. But also for me, I use it as a like a progressive relaxation thing. So I'm just like, oh, am I tensing my jaw? Relax this. Am I tensing this? Relax this. It's the only way I've been able to do it, and I quite like it. But before then, I used singing. Like for me, I was like, like every time I sing, I'm in a great bloody mood. I feel so happy, and to me, that is mindfulness, and is always going to make me feel better. Like the aim of mindfulness isn't to feel better in the moment. That's not actually the point of it. But it is finding what works for you as an individual. And yeah, like a lot of people love spending hours and hours doing their makeup, and it's just for themselves. I actually got that when I got into skincare. I got like a 10-step Korean skincare routine, and I realized it was the first time in my life that I was doing something nice for my body, just for me, as opposed to like, oh, I've got to do physio. You know, that was kind of what body care was for me. But
no, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. Like that is a really good one of just being like, again, it's just that mindfulness of just stopping, noticing, you know, but cracking on with something else in the meantime that makes you feel better, and concentrating on yourself for a little while. Absolutely works. I have no idea what the blokes would do. Guys, if you want to do your nails too, or if you want to do a 10-step Korean face care, absolutely should do it. I think that's a wicked idea.
But also it's like, for me, I've I've like come back to reading. I found ways to read again, and a big part of it was like, oh, I'm spending hours on social media. I was like, I'm reading on social media, I can read a book. So I was like, okay, go away social media. But and you know, like that, or you know, being more mindful about how I use my phone, or what am I doing with that, or even what's the other thing? Like one of the things I will say is that kind of being aware and setting boundaries and all of that type of stuff has enabled me to think about hobbies that I do for me. Like my hobby was writing, and that's my job now. So it's not fun for me. I see it all as work. So I need to have a hobby that's like purely for me and that makes me happy. And if it weren't for the pandemic, I started learning a language I've wanted to learn my whole life, and I wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for the pandemic. So, you know, it's finding ways to adapt what is special to you, and that's the most important thing, because it makes you happy. You know?
Yeah. Find what makes you happy. Do that more, basically. Yeah, and that's completely true. That's completely true. The other one I was going to suggest as well is, and we were talking about this a little bit before, was around this kind of taking a larger task, something that's big and overwhelming, breaking it down to little tiny elements, little teeny things. I don't know if any of you guys were here as well for the talk that we did on the physiotherapist. She was saying that basically is the exact same thing that happens there, is that, you know, if you have things like foot drop, or you have problems with your ankles or with your hips and things like that, to take the act of walking and to break it down into individual little bits, and then using your neuroplasticity, practice doing that. So if you've got to lift your foot up, practice just lifting your foot up. Sorry, I realize you can't see me. And then if you've got to extend, if you have a problem with the judder when you're extending, just practice extending over and over and over again. And that's how the neuroplasticity works in. There's also like a self-care thing about that as well. If you've got something that you need to do, put it into little tiny bits that you can do, list them all out, and then tick them off as you're going. That in itself is an act of self-care, because then you feel like you've done something. So again, it's not that thing of feeling overwhelming, like I've done nothing all day, but you also can see your progress towards it being finished, and you can measure out then how much energy it's going to take. So if you know that it's not going to be doable today, then you can stop at any point, rather than trying to push towards that overall big thing that you're trying to get finished. And that's a major self-care thing. That's something I definitely do. I've just recently redecorated this room, and it took me 2 months to do it, because I broke it down into little parts, and then was like, literally come in, paint one wall, and then it was like paint another wall, and then do a second coat. And these were like 3 days away from each other, but it meant that I did not boom and bust. I did not try so hard to do this room that I ended up in a small pile on the floor, like I have done with other rooms in my flat.
It's really, because I have to write for my job, it's actually really hard, because if your brain's not working very well and you have to write well, it's very hard to do that. So what I do is I rely on timers, and I adjust the amount of time that I do depending on how I feel. But like sometimes I'm like, can I write for 5 minutes and then take a half an hour break? But I've scheduled the break in, and I've scheduled what I'm doing in the break. And I one of the great things I learned from an occupational therapist with breaking things down is to think about your energy in different types of buckets. So there's a mental bucket. So say like writing or reading is like cognitive energy. Physical might be like getting something from the kitchen and making food. And then relaxation, which is whatever is kind of like a relaxing activity that kind of gives you more energy, and trying to cycle through that, because so much of what I do is cognitive. Like I have to kind of actively think about, I'm doing a cognitive task, what is like a small physical task I can do? So often like I work in my bedroom, I just like walk in here, I walk around the room, and my fiance, while my fiance is working, he's like, having an exercise break? I'm like, yep. I'll walk around the room and then get back into my room. Yeah, exactly. But that is you know, so for me, like having to really break down, like can I write a sentence? When I'm having a really hard time, write a sentence and then kind of like build it up from there. But it's really hard when you're like, you feel like you're kind of being really slow. But actually, you know, I take that rest time that I need to almost like recover to get back to writing. I view that as part of my work time. Because if I didn't, like, you know, I'd be completely screwed. But that's important. It is, because I wouldn't have to rest this way if I wasn't working. So, you know, I take it day by day, and I'm really like annoying about it. Like I schedule everything in my calendar. I schedule like what activities I'm doing, and it adjusts throughout the day. It's usually I haven't scheduled in enough rest breaks. But when I taught a friend about this, for example, she's like, I'm going to draw. And she scheduled like 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon to draw. It's like, you have to schedule in the rest breaks as well.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, okay. And it's that for me is the biggest act of self-care, is scheduling in rest breaks. Because when you write or you do something where you get in the flow of something, it's so easy to stay in bed like this and just work like this without stopping. Yeah. And then you're going to feel awful.
Yeah, and not actually taking a minute to realize that you're starting to feel rubbish.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, exactly. Scheduling definitely your rest breaks. Absolutely. The other one as well we've got on here that's just, I'm going to go through quite quickly, is what skills that you need. Try and understand what skills it is that you need to understand to manage your condition. So what skills do you need to understand to manage your condition? So obviously with MS, I would say it's things like your physical health, things like your vitamin D levels. It could be your fatigue levels. It could be your drinking and how much water you've had that day, and if you're dehydrated. But it could also be down to just things like, are you accepting of this situation? Do you are you surrounding yourself with people that are just not willing to understand or learn from this situation? Things like that, because that can be quite draining. So I think there's certain skills and things like saying no and things like that you need to understand, but first you need to take on, but first you need to understand how they impact you.
Can I add something to that? The one thing I would say is really helpful is to understand when, like, I was talking to a friend about this. He was like, I suddenly go from being okay to crashing. I'm like, no, you don't. There is stuff that happens between then. You have to figure out what, like, for example, I get really hot. Right now, I'm sweating. I'm like, I'm coming to an end of what I can do right now. I know I need to rest. I'm choosing, you know, like, I know that there are certain symptoms. I start talking quicker. I get really hot. I, you know, my heart beats faster. I'm aware that these are the symptoms that I've started to push. And so if you can become aware as soon as possible of what your unique symptoms are, it can help you get a better understanding of how you respond to certain situations and to help you make better choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Plug. I have a lot of content that I've made with experts on my blog and on my podcast and on my Instagram, where we kind of literally walk people through like dozens and dozens of questions that you can like sit down and reflect on to help you kind of figure those things out. So plug over, but in case that's helpful, I'd recommend that.
No, definitely, absolutely, and we'll send people over to your different platforms as well after this. Just quickly, just some of the comments again. Sarah is saying that MS has definitely slowed her down, leads to lots of feelings of frustration. So self-care looks like a massive expectation, management exercise. You are slower, and that's okay. Yes, and it is a massive expectation of the management of it, but at the same time, I think just always remember the fact that that expectation will help you feel less tired, which will make you feel better. So it's like it's a large undertaking, but it's there for a reason. There's a reason why your doctors and your nurses and your consultants will constantly push it onto you as self-care and looking after yourself. Gail, has also said there, my health is worse since I've been working from home over the last year because I feel like I've got to be constantly available and I don't have any rest breaks, let alone have enough. I think that's something, again, that's quite universal about COVID, about everyone having to work from home. I found that I've done the opposite, actually. I am not available for my lunch work hour. I completely take the whole hour, even though I'm at home. I go for a walk. I will have something to eat and make something like nice and nutritious to eat in that time. If I decide to make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, I still take as many cups of teas and coffees as I can in the day to get away from my computer and turn off. And in that time, it is, if anyone has any questions or upset or gets upset about it, tough, because I'm not taking it.
And one thing I will say, you know, everyone here has MS, I'm assuming. You are entitled legally to support under accessibility stuff at work. HR departments, all of these places, you should be able, if you are comfortable and feel like you are able to, I know a lot of people aren't, to have an access assessment at work where those things are put in place, so they have the conversations for you with your employers and your colleagues, so that you can say, like, I need to have more rest breaks, I need to not be pressured during these times. I know that's not always possible for every role and every company, but there are like legal things in place that can help to protect you, to make sure that you, I literally, like, I get really bad periods where I turn it into, like, I get very, very depressed and I can't really function. I said that, my boss knows about it. I did an article about it, so that kind of is helpful because we actually really dug into it. But like, I said that I have a few days a month, sometimes longer, where I just can't function. And so, you know, expect less of me during those times. And that is something that's embarrassing to do. But actually, all of my colleagues know how I work. But I'm lucky I'm in a job where that can be respected. But it is worth reaching out if it is something that you are able to do in your employment.
Yeah, if you don't ask, you don't know. And quite frankly, you have a legal standing to be able to say, no, what you're doing, if you do keep on trying to pushing, is definitely illegal. Right, so we're going to go on to now, so how does this start to impact your mental resilience? Well, how this is going to basically help you, just in general, just not just with your MS, but in generally with your mental resilience, which is what PPE for Mind Office is all about, is that it's going to do stuff like give you an arsenal of tools, so ways that you can work and manage. It will also give you a full toolkit for the bad times and a full toolkit for the better times as well, to be able to adapt and to the situation that you need to adapt to. And it will also just help you to, it gives you space, I think, once you get really into self-care, to really examine what it is that you are going for, where it is that you are at, whether you're happy, whether you're not, and things like that. I think, and that's massively important. So I would definitely say to everybody that's out there, please do that. And I've also noticed that we're talking just a little bit about occupational health. This brings us on to our last bit, which is where can you find more ways to take the best care of yourself? So where can you go to find out more apart from us talking on here? Natasha.
Sorry, I ran out of water, so I went and got milk and then poured it down myself. If you're in employment, a lot of places do have access to occupational health. I'm obsessed with occupational therapists. I think that the work they do is massively undervalued. I think a lot of people, they change people's lives. They can really support you, not just in terms of teaching you pacing skills, but also helping you figure out, like, you know, is sitting at a desk with I've got a backrest here and I've got a like a footstool. They can help you with that. You can, not everywhere, but you can get referrals on the NHS. You can talk to your GP. Some GPs aren't great with this, but some people, some GPs are able to refer people on. Again, for work, access to work. I just saw the civil services opted out of that, but a lot of places you can get access to work. It's harder if you're a freelancer. Reaching out to charities generally, they should have resources that can help signpost you in the right direction for the type of support and care that you need. And also there's a lot of great people talking on social media about a lot of these different issues that are creating resources that can help you think about things differently. That's all I can think about at the moment. So you might have a few other.
No, I think that's basically it. I would say that definitely in the UK, we have specialist MS nurses and your consultants and your GPs. Go and speak to those, definitely. Like you said, there's charities out there. I completely 100% agree. Occupational health are not something that we ever think of to go to, but they have a duty of care, and they are so knowledgeable about the specifics of your workplace, especially, and how it affects you, but also your home as well, and things like that. Like I've got things like I have like a bath seat in my bath and things like that, and just for things like that, that they were like in a grip to be able to get in and out of the bath. They were able to find those things for me and just say, this is what you need, and put it into place very, very quickly. They are an amazing resource that I think we don't think about that often. And obviously, I will always say as well, for anyone around the world, the one thing that I know that you definitely all have access to is the Shift.ms website. You can go onto their website and type into their, ask the question, and get lots of MSers to come back to you straight away, really, or really, really quickly, about, you know, what is the particular problem that you're finding, and how then people can kind of come and help you. Definitely. Oh, and that's a really good one, actually. Can anyone around the world, if you have a different one from the ones that we've mentioned, type it into the chat. Mary Gertz has just said that the USA has vocational rehab people working with planning and evaluation, which is just amazing, really. Oh, that's a really good one as well. Heather's just said that some OTs are experts in analysing sensory processing issues, and ideas such as the ear defender idea in busy places, a weighted blanket for restless legs, that's amazing, and a simple hat that can keep the sun out of your eyes to improve balance. That is absolutely genius.
Can I just add one thing as well? Like, I think a lot of people get a lot of advice from other people, and we kind of gave a disclaimer about this at the beginning. I think it's always worth going into asking for help, recognizing that what helps other people might not help you, and we should not be judging other people for what helps them, and they should not be judging us. So even if we are asking for advice and it doesn't work, you know, there's a lot of things that are harmful to try that we can talk about in like the pseudoscience realm of things. But a lot of things, you know, like Gemma and I might need different things for our bath, right? Just because one works better for the other, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I think going into any kind of space with a really open mind, and not also pushing things on other people, right? Like, I think it's one of those things where it's a two-way street. So just being really aware of that when you're trying to interact with others is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think as well, be very careful of the pseudoscience, and be very careful of putting a lot of things on your plate to achieve. I think that's the main thing. If I can get that across to anybody on this session at all, is be careful of how much you try to get to achieve without first working out what it's going to do for you, to make sure that it's actually worth you doing, rather than spend a lot of energy. And especially with the pseudoscience stuff, that's the bit that I find really dangerous, because you end up putting a lot of energy into something that actually doesn't help you, and you may not find out that it's not helping you for 2 years, 3 years down the line. In the meantime, you could have been doing other things to look after yourself, to make yourself more resilient, to, you know, understand what your boundaries are better.
Just a good tip for kind of being aware of pseudoscience, because there's a lot of things, like I fell for it, and I consider myself a very critical thinking person. I was very desperate, right? So, you know, it was the veganism will cure whatever, that type of thing. I think there of course, so if we talk about diet, for example, there maybe diet things for certain people that help certain people. Beware of anything that promises you a cure, but beware of anything, like, there might be where it might be the case for some people. I think reading up on things like the placebo effect can be really beneficial. If there's anything that seems a bit like wacky and miraculous, I live with a physicist, so let me just say, anything that says quantum, avoid. We find it very funny, this obsession with everything quantum. But also, you can Google the thing and quack, or the thing and pseudoscience. And if there are a bunch of scientists coming out and being like, hey, maybe be careful about this, it's a way of protecting yourself. So, you know, and a lot of people, if you post online about your health problem, you might have people come in and say like, oh, this really was amazing for me. So just be very careful and take everything that people send to you with a grain of salt before you research it yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because like I said, it may help you, it may not, but first and foremost, you know, a whole new way of life may help you, and may practically have you without any symptoms of MS. But in the meantime, it might not do. And in the meantime, actually not booming and busting will help you, and looking after your immune system and your immune response will actually help you not have the relapses in the meantime, and actually will help you then to not go down that level of those levels of getting more and more down the disability sort of scale. For me personally, the self-care one will always first and foremost, and it's probably pretty easy to put in there, rather than the sort of pseudosciences and stuff. So just want to then start wrapping things up and just saying, basically, thank you very much, everyone that's attended. I hope that's helped. That's quite a long one, but this is the last one now that we're doing of the PPE for the Mind stuff. The other videos of what we've already done in other sessions will be available soon. We will be putting them out on the internet for other people to watch. You may be able to see some of them that we've done on Facebook Live via the Shift.ms Facebook page. If you want to follow Natasha, Natasha will tell you where it is that you can find her and where you can find all of her information.
Thank you for having me. This has been really fun to talk about this stuff. You can find me on Instagram at Natasha Lippman. I don't post on there much anymore because that's an act of self-care. And you can find me on my blog, natashalipman.com. And I have a podcast called The Restroom, but everything is linked via my Instagram. And I have a lot of stuff that might be helpful that goes into some of the introduction stuff on this.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you everyone that's tuned in. I hope you found this all useful. At least have a look at all the other stuff that we've done. I saw that one of them said that someone was actually saying on here that someone has started CBT. I want to say a big thank you to Natasha and Kayla. You're in CBT because of the therapy and MS one that we did. So glad I've accepted. Shift.ms is a positive thing. You really are. That's amazing. If we've helped you, by all means, get in touch. Come and say hello. You can find me as well on Instagram. I think I'm under @SlinkyG. By all means, look after yourselves. Please, pace yourselves. Ask the questions, and if you need any answers, I'll see you over on Shift.ms on the webpage. Thank you very much, everyone, and good night.
Bye.